So I've got a couple more hours to get back at it this morning before I have to get to work. It was a drizzly night last night and a bunch of my stuff got wet, but I'll deal with it. Right now I'm working on some of the interior lights. I knew I wanted bright lighting. I also wanted color lighting. I essentially wanted like rock lights, but inside the cabin. And I looked at several different options and I weighed things out. I even looked at some of the RV add-on lighting, but nothing looked exactly like what I wanted it to be. So what I've decided on, I've got a couple of relatively generic just light mounts that fit my 2-inch roll cage. I'm going to use these inside underneath the roof, and I'm going to mount a piece of this 90-degree aluminum. And with this aluminum, what I've decided, so it's kind of a V shape, I'm going to point the V down, put this in the middle of the vehicle, and then I bought some waterproof LED light strip. I'm going to put the strip on the front and the back of the aluminum piece so that it'll illuminate both the back and the front seat at the same time. So that's the plan. Now I've just got to figure out how to fabricate it. So I've got my mounts on here and I've left them loose so I can move them around if I need to. So I've also taken my angle aluminum, I've marked the center location of that so that I can get everything mapped out symmetrically. A couple of holes drilled in it and this looks like it's going to fit very well. The problem I'm having at the moment is the bolts that I bought are too short. Speaking of hardware, I am using nothing but stainless steel. So stainless steel nuts, bolts, washers, and I'm using locking nuts, the nylon insert nuts, so that any vibration issues that I run into later on aren't going to be a problem with nuts and bolts coming loose. I've purchased new hardware and ready to move forward. In the downtime that I had yesterday, I did spray paint my angle aluminum, just flat black so that it matches my roll cage. Last night I also cut the LED strips and added the appropriate connector as well as heat shrink all the fittings. And I'm going to adhere them to the angle aluminum now. So for the LED light strip itself, it does come with a backing on it. The review said that the adhesive wasn't that great, and I've used this type in the past before and my experience has been that the adhesive is not great. So I am going to be applying, so this is 3M automotive exterior grade adhesive. I've used this stuff before on other projects and this is fantastic. I just finished up installing my light bar. I've got all the connections soldered, all of its heat shrink done into the roll cage. I think it looks like a really clean setup. I'm getting started working on the gauges, the switches, and the faceplate. I've taken my cubby hole, I've drilled a 2.5-inch opening so I can run the wires that I need, and then I've purchased a faceplate. This one, I found a company actually in Mesa, Arizona, UTV Inc., that manufactures these. It comes just as a 5-switch opening, and I've drilled a couple of extra holes into it that I'm going to use for some of my battery voltage gauges that I'll show you later. Looks like it fits. I'm going to get it marked out. I'm going to get the holes drilled for the mounting components, and then I can start running the wiring. Alright, as the sun is starting to go down now, I've got my wiring all put in and all put together. As you can kind of see, I'm a big fan of zip ties and heat shrink. If you're going to do a wiring job, do it right. That way everything's labeled, everything's marked, you know where everything goes. You're doing the job the right way. If anybody ever has to get into this dash or get into the wiring again, it's fairly well organized and it's fairly easy to make any repairs. So this particular switch panel, it's got 5 switches. Although I am actually using 6 switches. I don't have enough room for everything. For my model of Commander, there is one blank. I'm going to end up popping that out. I'll put the last switch in there and I'll be able to button up the dash and we'll be good to go. The sun has officially gone down, but this is a great time for me to test out my lights. So I'm going to hit my fuse block with some power. Oh, there it is. So they're starting to light up. Let me turn on my key for the other stuff. So the other things fire up. Getting my dual batteries. There we go. Looks like it's working. All right, turn the stereo on. Hit the power button. Looks like it's gonna work. Last step's the amplifier. I'm moving on to my last electronic device, and that's the amplifier. So I'll get the glove box out of the way, get it mounted up. I'm going to try this out, the inaugural test of the system. So, power on, 12.7 volts, acceptable. Stereo on, okay. Amplifier's on. I don't know if that's a valid station. Oh, here we go. Sure, it's going to need some tweaking, but there's some noise coming out. This is a positive sign. I have to play around with the settings, but this is awesome. My stereo's all hooked up. Amplifier's doing its job. Sounds pretty good. One thing I do want to mention. So the amplifier itself, it came with RCA inputs, and that's initially how I ran everything. It was a clip-in input with RCA connectors, so I figured that was the easiest way to make all this work. What I found out, the PMX2, the RCA connectors that are on the back of that, they're just a line-out connector. Basically, the volume is the only thing that's adjustable. The other stereo functions built in, like equalizer and things like that, aren't affected on the line out. So I ended up cutting off the wires and just running new speaker wire from the head unit to the amplifier. That way I can make the adjustments that I want. Another item I knew I wanted to add was a USB input for this thing. So I've got a USB extension cord, and then I also took and purchased a USB adapter, a dash connector. Just bought it online, and where the winch connector was in the glove box, I took that out. I got a winch switch. I don't need to hook a connector to it. But I've put a USB drive in the glove box. That way I can put music right onto a thumb drive, or I can plug my phone in and have those types of inputs for my stereo. I've got everything back together, everything's cleaned up, and I am extremely happy with the final product. There is, however, one piece that didn't work correctly, and that was the Sport low range plug that I bought. It's just an inline connector, and once I hooked it up, it wouldn't register the transmission at all. Didn't know that the vehicle was in park. I couldn't start it, and thought with all the electrical that I had done that maybe I crossed something or blew a fuse on something, and so after a lot of time checking, I determined that it was this transmission indicator, and so I assume that this is probably just a defective product. I'll go back to the person that sold it to me and see if I can get a replacement, and we'll try this another point. But other than that, the final product, for the amount of hours that I've put into getting this thing where I wanted it, I'm extremely happy with it.